Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Stansfield's Education Videos. Today we're looking at how to create an Andy Warhol inspired pop art portrait using PhotoPea. We're in part 2. If you missed part 1, go back and find that on the YouTube channel. So we've made a selection here of the very handsome Michael B. Jordan. What do we do next? Well, once you have your selection and you've refined the selection and made it as perfect as you can, go ahead and make sure that you have the image layer selected here in the layers palette. And then at the bottom of the layers palette, you'll see right here, this is the add raster mask or add layer mask. And what that will do is we'll get rid of the background. Now, the how well you do your selection will determine how well your mask looks. You can see here I've missed a little bit of the edge of the ear, right? There's a little bit of a halo around there. It's not perfect. This shirt's not perfect. This is okay. For this project, it really doesn't have to be perfect. This is just fine. If you didn't get something perfect and you want to refine that edge, it's really easy to do by painting on your layer mask or your raster mask over here. So with this selected, you can see if I click on the layer itself or the layer mask, that's how I select those. Once you create the layer mask, the default should be to have that layer mask selected, but just make sure you're on there. If you hit the D key on the keyboard, that will default to black and white. You can see your color picker over here in the bottom left of the tools palette. And that will allow us to paint if we use the brush tool. So if you click on the brush tool right over here, the shortcut key to select the brush tool is the B key on the keyboard, B for brush. And then the X key will switch between this black and white. It'll flip your foreground and background colors, which is pretty useful. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom all the way in. So I'm going to go to View, Pixel to Pixel, and then I'm going to zoom in one more time by holding Control and then plus to get in here. Remember, the spacebar key allows me to move this around. And maybe I'll just kind of fine-tune the ear here just a little bit, just to show you how to do that. Click the layer mask, hit D on the keyboard, and then X to paint with black. Hit B on the keyboard to select the brush tool. Make sure that your opacity is 100, your flow is 100. I like to turn smoothing up. I like a middle smoothing, somewhere between 30 and 60%. 40 is pretty good. And then up here, let's turn our hardness down just a tiny bit, not much less than 100. Somewhere around 85 or 90 I think is probably good. And what we're going to do is, oh, what did I do? I'm not sure what happened there. I had to go back and recreate my layer mask. So something happened and I had to redo it. But in this case, again, D on the keyboard for the default black and white, X to switch, B to select the brush tool, and make sure your opacity is 100, your flow is 100, smoothing is turned up slightly, and you've got the size that's appropriate, and then your hardness level here is going to be set to somewhere around 80 to 90%. And what I want to do here is once I've kind of done that, I can go in and I can click and drag with black on the layer mask to modify that. So you can see I can come in a little bit here and cuts in a little bit too much there. How do I undo really quickly? Well, the shortcut key is Control Z. I'm just looking to kind of fine tune this a little bit. There we go. Just kind of slowly kind of coming in a little bit at a time. Trying to get rid of this sort of halo that's happening around the ear without cutting too much off. So there we go. So you can fine tune this using the brush tool. If the brush tool is not working the way you want, try playing around with smoothing, right? Turn that down. Sometimes that can help. Or you can change the hardness. So the edge of the brush sometimes can make an adjustment. In this case, we did a really good job with our selection, and so there's not too much that we have to do with the brush tool. That looks pretty good. The next step is to convert this image to black and white. And to do that, we want to make sure that we have the layer selected, not the layer mask. So click on the layer itself, and then we are going to make an adjustment in a layer. So if we go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, we're going to choose Threshold. Now you could also access this from the bottom of the layers palette. Choose the threshold level that gives you the best results. You can see if we click and drag way over here to the left, that's not going to work. If we click way over here to the right, that's not going to work. So we want to find this sort of happy medium where we get some contrast, some of that facial hair, some detail in the eyes, all of that, but we have some space, some white space to paint in with color. So, you know, somewhere around here, somewhere in this maybe 100 to 150 is too much, maybe 135 is sort of on the high end, and there's some subjectivity here, so you can kind of choose whatever you feel like for your photo works the best. In this case, I want some kind of outline edging around the ears and the side of the face, but you know, under the chin there, that shadow gets a little bit too much. I want to see Michael B. Jordan in this image. I don't want it to be too dark or too light. So I don't know, yeah, I think somewhere around 120 here is going to be that sweet spot. So we'll try that. Now the good news is that you can actually come back and fix this later. So by having this be a threshold adjustment in its own layer, you can actually adjust this after the fact. So if you click on the properties menu, that'll go away. But if you click on this twice, it'll open back up and you can actually adjust this after the fact. You'll see why that's important and helpful later. After the threshold adjustment layer has been made, you can actually go back and adjust your layer mask. So if you had something in here that you wanted to retouch, like some of this sort of around his neck is sort of, I don't know if it's really helping us here. And so what we could do with the brush tool selected is paint on the layer mask here, and we could actually get rid of this area once we've created the threshold adjustment layer. We could kind of go into the eyes if we wanted to brighten those up a little bit, and so on. In this case, I'm going to leave it mostly as is, but if you had any additional retouching that you wanted to do, you could do it on the layer mask itself. Now, if we turn the eyeball off of the threshold, you can see that this actually isn't a super great part of, you know, the adjustment that we just did on the layer mask isn't really conducive. It doesn't look good, but once that threshold is there, it's going to do exactly what we want. So there it is. The next thing we want to do here is right click or two finger click on the threshold layer, and then we want to go ahead and click on clipping mask. And what that will do is it will create this little arrow pointing down, so it only affects this layer, this MB Jordan 2 layer, and that'll be important later. The next thing we want to do is select the layer itself here and change this blending mode to linear burn. And you'll see why that's important in just a minute. Now we're ready to paint. So click on the background layer and then create a new layer here. Now you can see through the checker on layer 1 that this is a transparent layer. What we can do is name this layer Color Fill, and then we can start painting. So what we're going to do, now the fun part, we go down to our color picker right here, click on that, and you can click any color from this sort of range right here, and then you want to pick a color that fits. Now I would say the darker colors aren't super great. You want to have mostly the colors that are up in this upper right hand corner. Over here it's a little bit too light, it's too close to white. Down here it's too close to black. Middle is okay, but it's kind of these super saturated colors are found up here in the upper right hand corner. So let's go ahead and choose purple, and then we're going to start painting. And we're ready to paint. So with this purple selected on the color fill layer, why didn't it select? It's black, purple, okay. There's my purple I'm looking for. Now to change the size of your brush, instead of going up here, you can use the right bracket and left bracket tools on your keyboard. So I'm going to just make a nice big brush here, and I'm going to paint all of the skin tone here purple. Now, it's okay if I go out, I can actually fix this later, and then you'll see I'll paint over areas that I need to. I can do that later. So let's go ahead and fill with white. If I hit the X key, okay, it paints with white. So I'm going to go ahead and do it like that. Or I could use the eraser tool. So the eraser tool is found right under the brush tool there, and I could erase this, which is probably a better idea, because if I look here, instead of painting with white, I actually want to erase that instead of painting with white. The functional difference probably isn't that significant, but it could come into play later. So how do I view all of these together like that? Let me just turn those eyeballs back on. So we're going to go ahead and erase this here, here, and then let's go ahead and get the brush tool again and then paint with purple. This time we're going to zoom in a little bit, fine tune this. Again, use the left bracket key to make your brush a little smaller. Get that ear kind of in there. So you can see not having the edge of the ear is a little tricky. Maybe this isn't the best photo for this project because of that, the way that this is working. Again, eraser tool to kind of fine tune this right here. And then brush tool. What's the shortcut key for the eraser tool? E. So B for brush, E for eraser. So I just hit E, and then I can erase this out a little bit here. Bring it back in. There we go. Get that ear in there. And you know, this you can spend some time with. You can get this just the way you like it. And if you do it right the first time, the next steps are going to be a lot easier. When you mix up the color down the road and change the colors for each of the four, you're going to find that that is actually pretty easy to do if you do a really nice job figuring out exactly how to bring this together. So let's grab our eraser tool here, erase that back a little bit, and then get our brush tool, and bring that back in. Okay. So what else? Well, you've got a couple of different things here. You've got earrings. You can make a different color eyes, hair, this button here, this chain. So you can play around with, depending on your image, which of these areas you're going to change the color in. Go ahead and select the eraser tool and erase some of these little teeny bits of white here in the eyes. You could also create a different color there if you wanted to. But you can see, so like going back here into the layer mask now, we may want to, again, hit D to default your black and white, hit X to switch, and then paint with black on the layer mask. And you can bring in some of the white. Am I painting in the right thing here? Let's try painting. Okay, so we actually want to paint with white on the layer mask here. You can actually create a little bit of the white of the eye if you wanted to here. You can kind of open up that eye a little bit using the layer mask. And then back to our color fill, then grab the eraser and you can erase that part to get rid of the purple. So you can kind of fine-tune things a little bit there. That didn't really work on his left eye, our right, so let's go ahead and bring that back again. Layer mask, D on the keyboard, default, get that color. And let's paint with black back in here. We don't want to have... Now, something went wrong here, so I'm gonna use the history. No, that's okay. That's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and add some more color. One thing that you may want to know is make sure we're on the color fill layer here. If you have lost that purple, well, how do you select it? Well, if you grab the eyedropper tool and then click on that purple, it'll select that color for you. So that can be kind of an important step to recapture the same color. Let's go ahead and paint in the rest of this image now. All right, here's what I came up with. Now there are a couple of things to note about fine-tuning this and getting it to be exactly right. And let's go ahead and back up here before I filled in my background. And so what I've done here is I've used the eraser tool to create the areas that I want to be white, in this case his teeth and the whites of his eyes. But you'll see that that becomes a problem down the road. I also want to fill in, I just realized his neck here, so let's go back to that color fill layer, make sure that we have the right image, the right layer selected. Click on the eyedropper tool, click on the purple, then the brush tool, and let's go ahead and paint that in, that part of his neck. Just want to bring that in there. Okay. And so what I've done is I've painted with green on eyebrows and hair. I've added in a color for the earrings, the necklace, and the button. For this particular photo, there wasn't too much to play around with in terms of different colors. You know, you may want to consider getting a photo of somebody with longer hair, right? So that way that the hair could be kind of its own color. Different clothing, in this case, the black of his clothing, it just becomes one kind of color. So a lighter color or clothing with a pattern that kind of breaks, you know, that opens up that sort of ability to have a really strong color in the clothing. In this case, though, I've chosen these colors, I've painted them in, and I've fine-tuned it using a combination of the brush and the eraser tool to get this to look exactly how I want. Now we're going to go and click on the background, and we're going to fill that background layer. So let's go ahead and choose a color, and let's go ahead and choose this light blue I kind of like. So click OK. And then we're going to fill that background, and you can see here, Edit, Fill, or Shift F5. In this case, we're going to choose the foreground color because that's the color we chose down here, and click OK. Now you can see that the whites of the eyes and the whites of the teeth now are blue. So the last step is to go ahead and click on the background layer, choose the eraser tool, and just erase out. Now we don't have to be super, you know, you can be really broad with this eraser. You don't actually have to be too specific with it, right? If you're over here, yeah, you're going to run into trouble, but you know, as long as you're kind of in the areas right there. So you can kind of choose for some white to come through. An alternative would have been to actually paint with white in these areas on the color fill level, color fill layer. You know, we could have painted with white on here, and then when we filled the background, we wouldn't actually have to paint through. Either way works fine. So now we're done with our first of 4 images. So we're going to go here and File, Save as a PSD. This is a really important step. And it's going to save our layers so that we can adjust this down the road. So we're going to go ahead and call this Pop Art 1. Maybe I'll go Jordan _ popart1.psd, save it to the right place, and click Save. All right, now we are going to create our second version. We're going to create our second version by inverting this. So let's go ahead and click on the background. Let's go ahead and Image, Adjustments, Invert. And you can see the shortcut key is Command-I. And that gives me the opposite color. Let's go ahead and click our color fill and do the same thing. So Image, Adjustments, Invert, and all of the colors flip. And so you can see here that we are able to get a much different photo just by inverting our colors. The white still stands, and that's okay. And we're going to go ahead and save this again. So File, Save as a PSD. But when you click Save As, you have the opportunity to save it as a new file. What I'm going to do is go and find the image Jordan Pop Art 1, and I'm going to change that to 2. So you don't want to save over the same file. You want to rename it. That's going to be really important. Step 3 is to actually create a totally new color fill and a totally new background. So we're going to go ahead and click on the background and fill with white. Edit, Fill with white. And click OK. And then we're going to go to our color fill layer and Edit, Fill, and we're going to fill it with transparency. Transparency is not an option, so let's go ahead and let's delete this layer. Okay, drag it down to the trash can, select the background layer, and create a new layer. So layer 1, color fill. And you're going to do this again. You're going to paint by hand. And the key to doing this, painting by hand, is that there are always going to be subtle inconsistencies or subtle differences between each painting that you do. And that's good. That's what we want. We want to have some variation, some kind of strangeness to this. And so when we blend all 4 images together, you're going to do basically 2 hand-drawn, hand-colored images, and then you're going to invert both of them. You want to choose different colors for the 2 hand-drawn, and then the inversions will obviously be different colors too. And then we'll have 4 images. So go on to part 3 for how to bring all 4 images together.